Hi again guys, and welcome to, of course, another full breakdown of an update in the world of GT Sport, the 1.38 patch, this time slightly different in a few ways. And before I get into the pack itself, or the patch, or the update itself, there are a couple of things that need to be said. The first one is that this was initially going to be easily the most controversial breakdown I have ever done of an update, because of how awful this update is. The reason why, though, is arguable, and that's the reason why I haven't gone full rant in this video. I'm trying to keep it positive because I'm not exactly sure about the circumstances surrounding this update, because myself and a number of other members of the community, including on the Discord server, have been having issues, major issues in fact, with the game after this update. You occasionally get random people losing game saves with updates, that kind of stuff. But generally speaking, it tends to be more localized. This time it seems to be happening more, and it's not losing save data as such, it's just crippling the game in terms of the server. And that's what I'm not certain about, because it could be the fault of the update, or it could be a separate server issue that's causing these problems. Because the game is not saving, it's not connecting to the server when you first upload it. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I cannot access any of my liveries from my library, which is the main reason why the Porsche in this video has the stock livery, because I happened to change it back by mistake and now I cannot access any of the others. I can't load the community page properly, the menus take longer than usual to load. Usually I let stuff like that slide, because to be completely honest, for months I've had laggy menus in the game. And eventually, you can't just stay positive about it, you've got to call it out, because as positive as I like to be about any game that I'm playing, if possible, it's unacceptable. This is the 1.38 update. 38 updates have been done to this game. This should not be happening at all anymore. Whatever the issue is, you've had 38 attempts to get it right. It's still happening, and it happens to some degree every single time I've updated my game, be it the smaller mid-monthly update fixes or the larger ones. So again, I don't want to go full rant, because it could be a server issue causing the issues rather than the update itself, but I have my suspicions, let's just put it that way. Now, to get into the pack itself, some people will be disappointed even if it was working just fine, because there is no circuit. Now, we, of course, earlier on today touched on the fact that Goodwood has been confirmed. We don't know if that's going to be in the next update or a future one, so of course circuits are still a thing. Last month we saw the circuit added, I think it was in the later update rather than the earlier one, or something like that, I don't recall exactly. But there's no circuit in this particular patch. We have new career mode events, of course the 5 new cars, some gorgeous new escapes locations in New Zealand, quite a few of them in fact, and I believe a few were already in the game, if I recall, and they've kind of been collated together, but I'm not certain on that. So what then about the vehicles? Because of course most of you are here for that. So first of all, let's talk about my personal favourite car of the pack. I think probably the highlight of the pack for the majority of racing fans at least, the Porsche 962. As you can see, and as I mentioned just now, it's got the standard livery because of the game issues, which annoys me to no end, but at least it's not a bad livery. And it is of course the short tail, if you will. I would have, of course, preferred the long tail 962, as I think most people would have, so it's kind of a strange choice to go for this one, which is more of a kind of a cornering based version of the car rather than the full-on Le Mans setup. But still, it's a 610 horsepower car, it costs 1 million credits, and incidentally you're only looking at 1.18 million credits for all 5 cars, so it's actually one of the most affordable updates yet. And if you discount this car, it's only 180,000 for the other 4, so pretty cheap. Now, as far as performance goes, you can see all 5 of the cars in this video. If you look at the bottom of the screen, it's the first time I drive each one of them, on whichever track it was. So, for my first impressions, which is what these videos are all about, the Porsche is great. It looks great, of course, it sounds fantastic. Some people might find it to be a little bit underwhelming, but having heard one in person and stood right next to it as it revved up its engine and started up, etc., it sounds like that. It's actually pretty authentic to the real thing, very authentic in fact. It's a little bit of an underwhelming sound. Personally, I find most Porsches to be underwhelming in terms of the sound, apart from maybe the Carrera GT. But in terms of performance, it's quick. It's no long tail, but it's certainly quick. You're looking at up around 240 even with the chicanes, and you can see that in my replay. The handling is spot on. It's got more of an understeer kind of approach to the steering. It's heavier than you might expect, which is typically something you would expect more of from a long tail rather than the short tail, but it still has a massive amount of downforce with the large rear wing, almost like a semi-long tail shape anyway, and also of course the huge diffuser at the back, very reminiscent of a couple of years later in the form even of the Nissan, the R92CP, which of course is a full-on long tail but still has a very similar shape. For good reason, they're both Group C cars, and both very impressive ones. So my thoughts on the Porsche are, I love it, across the board. I love the cockpit view, I love the sound, I love the performance. It's not as powerful as you might expect, but you can tune it up to about 940 horsepower. I haven't tested it on Route X, but it wouldn't surprise me if you can get maybe the high 250s, maybe around 260 out of it with a more optimised speed tune. So yeah, pretty good, and pretty good against the other Group C cars in particular. And the pricing, of course, is a direct rival to any of them anyway. Next up, of course, we have a car which a lot of people are arguing is actually their favourite of the pack, and the most anticipated, of course, the Toyota, the AE86, famous from Initial D. My thoughts on this car certainly do not align with the absolute nutbag fans of it, and we'll get to that more in its individual review, but it's one of those occasions where I certainly don't hate the car or dislike it. I just think it's put on a pedestal which is frankly insane, purely because of its pop culture references, kind of like the DeLorean, which is super famous but isn't actually a very good car. But in the case of this one, we'll get more into it in its video. Certainly not a bad car like a DeLorean, but as I said, my thoughts will be out there soon enough. In terms of the handling on the AE86, it's spot on. I expected it to be trying even to be drifting all the time. It's not. The handling is actually very good. I tightened up the diff, lowered it, stiffened the springs, etc., dropped the weight. It's still an N100, so considering, you can see it's going some around this track, considering it's in the lowest class in the game. Next up we have another car which I'm fairly indifferent about, but I will say straight off the bat, I like this a lot more in terms of the way it sounds and the way it handles in particular than I ever did in GT6, and that is the Gordini, the Renault R8. Interestingly, in a new dealership, not the Renault Sport dealership, but another, well, sole car in the Renault dealership. So now we've got two different dealerships for Renault. It's interesting. It's an interesting little car. It's expensive at 80,000, rear engine, rear wheel drive, built-in roll cage, kind of a rally car for the road sort of vibe. And I think that's one of the main reasons why the most controversial thing about this vehicle is the class. I didn't even give it a second thought, but yes, it's Group X, which is insane, but there you go. So there's nothing we can do about that. It's not going to matter to me too much because it's not the sort of car I would use all the time anyway, but it's kind of a shame from a performance point of view because this would have been, I have no doubt, a dominant N100 car. Because you can see here on the dirt, it's fantastic. It flies through the corners on the circuit, or on a tarmac circuit. I'm yet to drive it there, but I probably will for my actual review of the car itself. And then we'll see if it feels as good on road as it does off. But if it's even close, it's great, and it feels like it could very easily be an OP vehicle. And then tying in directly after the kind of ironic placement of the Gordini, we have the Honda Hybrid, the Honda Fit or Honda Jazz, which, strangely enough, is not a Group X car, but is actually an N100. So kind of a flip-flop of what seems to make sense in this video. It's not exactly like the Honda is overwhelmingly fast, but then again, neither is the BMW i3, and that ended up in Group X. Seems kind of like favoritism for the Japanese brand there, kind of allowing that to slip by. But there you go. There are various opinions and theories you could have on that, but the Honda is probably kind of the unexpectedly weird choice of the pack. Like, why would they add that among the others? But at the end of the day, you've got to remember, Gran Turismo always featured cars like that, these more normal, slower, cheaper, everyday machines. Gran Turismo 2 was full of them, and it was all the better for it. Gran Turismo 4 onwards started to see tons of different variations of those more street-level, especially Japanese machines like this one, but this is a debut for the car in the game. As far as how it performs, there's not that much to get into, so I'll just save it for the review, but again, it's what you expect. It's not going to blow your mind. It's a Honda hybrid. It costs like 16 grand. It's the cheapest car of the pack. It's N100, not the fastest thing out there, and probably the most interesting thing about it is that it has 7 gears. Beyond that, it's a hybrid. What do you expect? And last but not least, of course, we have the Audi, the TT 3.2 litre Quattro, earlier 2000s shape. A car which has been in Gran Turismo for a long time in various forms. The TT Quattro is just one of those cars that I put in a similar category to stuff like a Golf GTI or a Mitsubishi Evo or a Subaru Impreza, and that is, it gives you exactly what you want and what you expect. The car doesn't blow your mind, but it doesn't disappoint. It's exactly what you expect the car to be. A 240 horsepower all-wheel drive coupe. Fairly neutral handling, very forgiving, very beginner friendly. It's not the cheapest thing around at just under 60 grand, which for its age is kind of strange, but considering, you know, expectations are what they are. They're not overly high for a TT, but what it turns out to be, it's a great car in its own little way. Not the quickest of N200 vehicles, but again, this was my first ever lap with it. So being a couple of seconds behind the pace of my N200 Subaru 22B Impreza, that's not bad. It certainly has room to grow, room to improve it with the tune. So as far as my overall thoughts go, I actually quite like the car's selection here. It's a small selection, of course, so hopefully we'll see more at the end of the month. We are still due to have that new confirmed Time Attack Civic added to the game. I might do a standalone video for that, I might not, I'm not sure, but articles are out there about it anyway, and of course the newer V12 version of the Red Bull, which we're still not sure when that's going to drop either, so who knows, that could be at the end of this month. We might get Goodwood this month, we might not, but overall it's hard for my thoughts to be as pure in this video as they would usually be, because the issues, be it due to the server or due to the update, are so severe that I can't view liveries properly, I can't load them properly, the game keeps disconnecting mid-race, not even saving mileage that I've done, or lap times, or replays, so it's kind of hard to stay positive with this one overall. They need to fix this issue very quickly. I'm hoping tomorrow, if not earlier, because when they do that, we see fixes come out soon after. So if this is happening to a lot of players, it needs to get dealt with, because as I said, we are way beyond this being acceptable. These issues need to be ironed out before the update is even released. That's kind of the point of an update. So there you go. But that's my thoughts on the patch. Of course, stick around on the channel for more leaks and news in a general sense, but also for breakdowns and tune setups, and probably some rivals matches as well, with the Porsche in particular, here on the channel in the coming days. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.